all of you for joining. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be covering 6 ingredients that we consistently see in strong engagements. And some of those ingredients are just like purely foundational. They're the building blocks on which you're going to design your activations and events. Some are in the programming and some are in the final output, but together they make up the components for success. And I want to say off the top, there is a whole world of expertise in brand community building, and we won't be talking about that specifically today. This is really about the spaces and the moments and the marketing that support those community moments. But if you do want to step deep into the world of brand community building, I really recommend checking out Community Academy. So some friends of ours who come from Lululemon, they were early brand and community builders at Lululemon, and they have a cohort of their Community Academy program that's starting September 30th. If you're in British Columbia, you can use the BC Employer Training Grant to qualify for that. So it essentially is covered. So visit communityacademy.co if you want to sign up for that. And it's global, the cohort. But today our focus is really on designing super engaging events and the spaces that support them. And it's also important to say we're considering all aspects of the funnel. So top of funnel awareness, or that sort of attract stage, middle of funnel engagement, so actually getting your existing audience to participate, and thinking about that eventual bottom of funnel conversion. So we've organized our 6 ingredients sort of chronologically in the order that you might want to be thinking of it as you're planning your activations, kind of walking you through the steps of the process, but we're approaching it kind of that holistic full funnel perspective. So here's a quick overview of our time together. In addition to those 6 ingredients, we're also going to share some trends that we're seeing in the world of experiential moments and physical activations. And then, like I said, we'll wrap up with questions and ideally a chance for you all to share maybe what's worked for you and learn from one another if you all are feeling brave and want to contribute. But before we dive in, maybe a quick overview of who we are. I know some of you may have found us through MJY, some of you may have found us through Monday, and some of you might not be familiar with either of us. So we represent 2 teams that work closely together, Monday Creative and MJY Fabrication. So a little bit about Monday. I'm Amanda. I'm the founder and CEO of Monday, and we're a brand insights, strategy, and creative agency. We're primarily based in Vancouver, where we've been for the last 8 years. But as of a month ago, we also now have an office, aka me, in Portland, Oregon. But we work with clients across North America, and we've even worked with clients as far as Ireland and New Zealand. And our background is really in performance brands, so largely in the active, outdoor, and wellness spaces. Over the years, we've worked with and continue to work with brands that include Lululemon, Arc'teryx, Adidas, EA Sports, Keen, and Organica, closer to home. But we've seen that client base grow to include all kinds of clients. So even beyond retail, we work with education, nonprofit, and real estate as well. And I think there's really amazing experiential opportunities in all of those industries. We have a bi-weekly podcast at Monday called My Best Campaign, where we talk to marketing and brand leaders about a career-defining campaign. And we also find out how they got their awesome job and what trends they're seeing in the industry. We have a monthly newsletter where we share insights from our digital magazine and latest episodes of the podcast. And I'm joined today by Ryan Romero, our creative director. He's kind of the conceptual, imaginative brain behind a lot of the work you're going to see today, and he'll be speaking to some of that. Here's a quick little video overview. joined today by Michael, who leads MJY Fabrication. I'm going to hand it over to him real quick to introduce him and what they get up to at MJY.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Hi, Michael Young here, from founder of MJY Fabrication. We're a custom fabrication studio in Vancouver. We do custom builds for museums, institutions, brands, for events, brand activations, retail spaces. Sort of two sides to our business: museums, exhibits, and branded builds. Both very creative and very much about connecting people together. We started off in the museums and exhibits side, but we've also started working a lot more with brands, creating immersive experiences, which is not very far off a museum exhibit itself. We're all into finding ways to connect people in the real world together, really creating that community and connectivity. So ultimately, we build it. We work with Amanda and Monday Creative to create the real experiences, the physical experiences. And we work with a host of brands and also institutions, municipalities, Red Bull, Vancouver Aquarium. We rebuilt the roller coaster cars for the PNE. So we find some creative solutions and think things through together with Monday and you. So that's a quick overview of what we are. And I think we also have a video to show too.
Yeah, let's look at some of your work.
Everything we build, we put it out into the world with the knowledge that we ourselves would be happy to either have it or interact with it in some fashion. Nothing leaves the shop that we don't care about, right to the core.
We're just not a cookie cutter shop. Every day is kind of different. Every job is different. We don't often do two of the same thing.
I like to say we can do anything, we can build anything. I know that sounds cliche, but I think with the people we have here and the team we have, we can build anything.
Awesome. Okay, let's dive into this. Why are we here? So at Monday, we've spent 8 years developing brands from scratch and helping them rediscover their North Star, or maybe even articulate that North Star for the first time if they're over-indexing on performance or focusing solely on product. But we also do a ton of campaign work. And in the last few years, that has included more and more incredible brand activations. We obviously had a pause on experiential during COVID, and then it slowly trickled back, and now it's back with full force. So we recently did an audit of all of those projects and considered what are the things that make physical activations truly work. So we're going to talk about functionally what actually makes them work, but there's a bigger purpose behind these projects. And for us, I would say it's probably the number one metric we're looking for in all of our brand work. Obviously, conversion matters. At the end of the day, we need consumers to make a purchase, but there's a lot of work that happens before the purchase happen. And I think experiential marketing is core to that. And it's all about building loyalty. So as a brand building agency, we're interested in helping our clients get discovered, top of funnel, but we're much more interested in that true engagement, affinity that adds up to loyalty. So what's going to make someone come back to you again and again? What's going to make them follow you on social media and talk about you to their friends? Or even better, what's going to make them feel enough of a connection to the brand that they start doing your marketing for you, creating and sharing your content? And that's really the wonderful thing about loyalty is you get all those outcomes, and eventually sales become the natural outcome. So we see a bunch of benefits to loyalty. Specifically, though, these ones stand out. So your most loyal fans also become your most valuable data points. So they're your best source of feedback, both positive and negative. And you want both. You want to know where you can improve. They are really eager to tell you exactly what they think. And those inputs that you get from them are so indispensable as you're considering future initiatives. So you just don't want to sleep on getting their feedback. And I think that finding those moments to connect with them face to face is where you're going to get the most valuable feedback. So like I said, those fans then begin to do the hard marketing work for you. They become your evangelists. They bring their friends back the next day. They mention the event in the family chat. Speaking specifically of the work that we do at Guildford Town Center, which we're going to be sharing. My whole extended family lives out towards where that shopping center is. And in our family chat, every time Monday does a new activation, I hear about it from one of my uncles and aunties because they spot it and they love it. And then speaking of marketing, we all know that truly great activations lead to just a ton of content. So great spaces and great interactive moments are what is going to fuel a lot of your UGC, your user-generated content. Your most loyal fans are the ones that are going to share that content in their channels. But also you should be prepared to capture your own content. We'll talk about that a bit. And then there's a fourth reason why I think this is so important that we might not think about that often, but it creates a space for us to give back to our community. I think for many of us, especially those founders maybe that are in the group here, but if you've been at a brand long enough, you feel this too. The super fans are the reasons you do this. And seeing their passion and their enthusiasm for your brand can be really reigniting and remotivating. It's a huge driver. And once you have their buy-in, you get to give back to them. And you get to give back to them through discounts and product and insider access, and also through these experiences. All right. So there are lots of ways to build loyalty. As you know, you probably are all thinking about this every day, but we know that increasingly in-person activations are starting to take center stage. Lots of reasons why. Paid media is just becoming really expensive and really unpredictable as algorithms change. Social algorithms can really limit your reach. We all know that email is still incredibly valuable, but it's kind of contained within email inboxes. And I just think physical activations can have exponential reach. It's sort of AI proof as you're thinking through your marketing strategy. And I talk to brand marketers and brand leaders multiple times every week. And the thing that I'm hearing is that after kind of that pandemic period where performance marketing really, really worked, now, in the midst of economic uncertainty, it feels like brand building is really back. And I'm seeing this in the work opportunities that are coming to Monday. The RFPs that I get are really brand first campaigns, even for companies that haven't always prioritized brand. Maybe they were more product focused in the past. The RFPs that I'm getting are for large scale activations and small scale activations. But it seems like everyone's discovering that investing in loyalty is the thing that's going to keep their business strong in turbulent times. And there's evidence that it really works anecdotally. We have friends that run a resale platform called Archive, and Archive does the resale for Lululemon, a lot of other major brands. Archive and Lulu partnered on an activation at South by Southwest last March when they relaunched their Like New resale program. I think they only had spots for maybe like 100 to 200 people at the events, but they saw a 30% lift in online traffic just from the Austin area where South by Southwest was in the weeks following that activation. It had a huge knock-on effect for the brand. And for those of you who have a retail component to your activations, we know that 35% of shoppers will visit spaces specifically for experiences beyond just buying. And physical store conversion rates tend to exceed 20% versus just 0.5 to 3% online. So people are still shopping online, but if you can get someone to engage with your brand in person, they're dramatically more likely to make a purchase. And if you can get people to stick around in your retail spaces longer, stats say that increasing your dwell time by just 1% leads to an average 1.3% increase in sales. So the growth potential is just massive. So we've established that it's important. And it's probably becoming a bigger part of all of your roles as marketers. So how do we get it right? Let's talk about that. Like I said, we narrowed it down to 6 ingredients that make incredible real life activations. And the first one comes way before you're even thinking about the season, before you're planning what your calendar is going to look like. It will make ideation easier. It makes sure that your concepts don't go off the rails and veer away from the core of your brand. It helps you really define who your guest list is going to be, what you want to do for swag, for any stunts. And it's really establishing solid brand foundations. So I think of it as just having a clear set of brand guidelines. So more than just your visual brand guidelines. And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how often brands come to us and you think that they're established brands. They've been around forever. They have maybe some visual brand guidelines, but they don't have any core positioning, brand pillars, a kind of North Star or brand purpose. And I think to do a strong activation, you need to know what you stand for. You need to know who your core demographic is. Who's your ideal shopper persona? What does your external facing brand voice sound like? Is it, is it playful? Is it more sophisticated? Is it younger, more mature? Is it kind of bold or cheeky? I think knowing how your voice sounds allows you to define the tone of your event for your space. And often it's trapped in like a CEO, founder, or marketing director's head. And I think unless you get that out and document it, you can never hand this work off to your team or onboard partners. Obviously, we create a lot of those brand standards for our clients. We're doing it right now, or we've just finished doing it right now for a different shopping center client that's not featured in this presentation, that's really established and had been around for years, but it never had kind of defined its own personality or kind of brand pillars beyond just like seasonal campaigns. And we know that the best creative happens when you give boundaries. We've all experienced this. We all need guardrails for really great creative. And when you're thinking about your activations, you want imagination and you want to speak to your audience and you want it to be really brand aligned. And I think there's just too much ambiguity if you don't already have that clarified. You need to know who you are and who you aren't. So here's a really good example of a brand that knows who they are, a brand called Smash and Test. They did this incredible pop-up at Guildford Town Center. And because we have Ryan here and he was deeply involved in defining this, he's going to talk a little bit about how this came to life.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, this is a great example of not just bringing a brand to life, but bringing a community to life. And a community is made up of a culture, super fans that are very opinionated, that know the brand so well. It's got its own way of speaking. It's got its own language. And it's not just the brand standards that have defined that. A whole culture has a way of speaking to each other and talking. There's the product, starting from the product, there's a tactility to the product itself. And it's just a project where, like, how does that actually feel when it becomes four walls, when people have to walk on top of it, on it, when it becomes a shelf, when it becomes a changing room. So this is just like that example, when there's going to be a speaker that really is a perfect example or a perfect brand ambassador. How do you present them? How do you lay it all out when it's more than one day? So just really taking that into account in the way this was executed, listening to the client, being challenged by the client, really, in how we took the messaging and the story and the narrative for this, and how it kind of went into the different marketing assets. So this is a perfect example.
Yeah, we really started with incredibly clear brand parameters for this one. And anyone that knew Smash and Test walked into the space and it felt like you'd walked into the Smash and Test world. Okay, the next core ingredient is a clear brief with a purpose. So this is really the starting place, should be a project brief. And again, it might seem obvious that you should have a brief, And yet, you'd be shocked how often we forget to do this as brand leaders. Or maybe we accidentally keep key information in our heads, assuming our partners will intuit it. But when you're doing these activations, usually you're not doing it alone. Usually you have, like, maybe it's influencer partners or other brands that are involved or production partners, and you need to get this all out. So, some things that your partners really need to know: what part of your audience are you trying to reach? If the idea is kind of developed enough to this point, then get really specific. Give examples of the types of influencers you'd want to have there. What are the parameters for your guest list? And what do you want them to do when they get there? Maybe that's something that you're empowering your agency or other partners to figure out, but you probably have an idea of it. Who needs to be involved? Are there other brand partners or vendors to consider? Are you building it around one particular influencer or a season, a product story? Is there a particular brand pillar that might be shining through this whole activation? And what's the timeline? Is there a bigger campaign or launch that this needs to coincide with? And we typically advise 3 to 4 months as a timeline if you're doing a physical space. 1 to 2 months for kind of concept and design, and 2 months for a custom build. If there isn't a custom build, 1 to 2 months, very realistic. Sometimes timelines are crazy. When you need to do it in less time, just know there's going to be budget implications. So it's just helpful to know what those non-negotiables are so you can build around it. Obviously, like, more budget always means more expedited timelines, but I'm going to hand it over to Michael. He's going to talk really specifically about site requirements, what you're thinking about in terms of location when you're doing your brief.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So obviously, as your fabrication partner, our job is to manage those technical complexities and help you through that. But it's good, very important for you to be aware of the various things that we'll probably need to review with you or review about your space. So size and transportability. Will it fit through the door? Where is it going? Like, how do we get it into your space? Very important to consider that. Sometimes things have to be in parts, cut into pieces, they get assembled. There's going to be seams sometimes and things just to get it through the door. It's important to understand that. Height, sight lines, plumbing, electrical. So perhaps where you are, there's specific guidelines around sight lines. If you're around other stores, does your activation require plumbing? Does it require electrical? What are the complexities around that? How do we get it, depending on where your location is? Safety and codes, depending on the size of what you're doing, we might need permits, we might need to get something engineered. So being very clear about top level safety. Obviously, safety always should be number one. Build logistics, considering installation and strike. When does it have to happen? What is going on in the space? Is it public space and we need to do it at night? What's required there? How long will it take to do based on the complexity? So planning around that together. Storage and reusability. What are you going to do with it afterwards? What do we do with it? Can we reuse it? Can you reuse it? And if you do, where are we going to put it? Storage is very important to consider. Do we need to look at storage solutions together? And then can we reuse it? Sometimes it's tricky to do so. So very important to talk about that very openly right off the top as well. And then security, depending on where it is, if it's in a public space, you don't want the public getting into your activation or dealing with your product off hours or when you're not using it. So something that can be forgotten, but very important. How do we lock it up? How do we keep your space secure? Ultimately, what it comes down to is listening, learning, communicating, and asking questions throughout the entire process together. We're here to work with you as a team. You're not just our client. You're our partner. We want to make it work. We want to create those connections with your clients, with your customers. We're a team here. So ask questions throughout the entire process. If you don't get anything else from what I just said, ask questions. Feel free at any time.
I added something to the list here, Michael, around mobility, because we're actually in the middle of quoting on a very large project that involves moving an activation from New York to Denver over the course of a few months and having it pop up in different places. So, sometimes you just want something that can follow you if you're taking it on a road trip or you want to hit up a bunch of different cities.
Absolutely. Very important. Here's a great example of a project we recently did for the Vancouver Aquarium. So this required a lot of thinking, a lot of testing, and safety requirements. Children were interacting with this. This is the children's exhibit there. So how do we keep it safe? How do we make sure things are CSA approved? How do we make sure things are also durable? You know, children and general public can be quite abusive. So how do we make sure we balance all those things? This project also required a lot of balancing of time and also budget. So really good example of what can be done. We did this in a very short period of time. This was about a 1 month turnaround time on a very, very complex project that required a lot of things to it. So just a quick little example of what can be done and how all these various items are very, very important to consider in terms of just what we've also mentioned, the size of some of these things. This unit you see here on the right, that was fully all in parts and all assembled on site. So because you got to get in the room. So very important to consider all these things together. So you create beautiful end product that really draw people and create that sense of community and connection.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk about the next ingredient. And I think this one's universal. You know, not everyone's doing a huge build out when you do your activations, but I think every single one needs to start with a compelling story or a smart concept. Really strong activations are rooted in a narrative. What is the story that holds it all together? And, you know, I talked about guardrails, and I think that story is another really meaningful set of guardrails that creates great work. So at Monday, we like to establish a creative concept to root every activation that we create. What is the why behind this particular event or activation? We give it a name, something that's ownable, easy to communicate, and memorable, a strong conceptual tagline. So you're giving people the language to talk about it on your behalf. And you need to give your audience a reason to care. What's the motivating idea that's going to drive them to get out of their house and break out of their routine? And because you've already started with your core brand positioning and your brand personality as the framework, you know right away if that concept or that story is the right fit. You can automatically just go back to your brand standards and go, does this concept align with the brand? And then from there, you can give the activation its own look and feel. It should be rooted in the story and rooted, but also like really rooted in your brand identity. It should feel like a natural extension of your brand. It shouldn't be like a shocking diversion from your brand. Here's a quick checklist to vet if you have a strong concept. First, is there a clear participation component beyond just like a step and repeat photo moment? We like to think of this idea of friction. You want just enough friction. So a simple giveaway doesn't really ask that much of the customer. I did an episode of our podcast recently with Ty Haney, who is the founder of Outdoor Voices, and she talked about their run clubs that they did. And a lot of brands are now doing run clubs, but back then it was really novel. And she compared it to, say, a margarita party. You show up for a margarita party, there's not really that much friction. There's not enough commitment to really kind of weed out who your super fans are. But if someone shows up at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning or at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night, like those are your real fans. They're devoted, and those are the people that you're doing this for. Number two, is it shareable? What would make someone put it in their stories? Or even better than in their stories, like right in their Instagram feed or in their group chat? To get the privilege of being kind of in the group chat or in the feed, you need something that seems really human and relatable. I think, you know, if I go to our activation that we did for Smash and Test, everyone loves taking a picture of a cute slogan. They're great. But even better, how do you find something that really hits a true nerve? And that's where I think you really get credibility. And a perfect example of this is our friends at the wellness brand Belly Welly. It's like a fiber powder. It's massive in the US. They've done a bunch of fantastic billboard campaigns. And the first one that they did was just a big pink billboard that said, "Hot girls have IBS." And if any of you hot girls have ever had IBS, you know that that speaks to a real core part of who you are. It's so human and relatable and shareable. And I think capturing something like that for your activations will really give it legs. Number three in your checklist, is there a purpose? is there some kind of give back, or is there something that makes people feel good? It doesn't have to be complicated, but you want people to feel good about showing up. And obviously, like there's nothing wrong with a giveaway. Perks are great too. Maybe it's not just a giveaway, maybe it asks for something in return, like maybe it's a discount code that's only valid during an upcoming slow period, or maybe it's a contest entry that requires a social share, or maybe it's just for people who give their email addresses. Like that idea of friction, getting something in return is great for the perks. Here is a really strong concept that I think is a perfect example of something that had a narrative built into it. So, Guildford Town Center revived this kind of historic icon last year, and anyone that grew up in the suburbs of Vancouver, kind of prior to the 2000s, they knew Stardust Roller Rink. So this concept was totally rooted in nostalgia, and it was all about participation. Like roller skating has become such a hot trend, but it's not something we do every day. So when you do it, and especially when you do it in this sort of black light setting, it becomes really shareable content. There was fun signage, so like different activation points where you might take a photo. There was a DJ booth. This thing was packed out for the 8 weeks that it ran. It was sold out every single day. And there was also an amazing give back. So Guildford Town Center, they funded this entire thing, and all the proceeds from skate rentals went to the Surrey Firefighters Burn Fund. So people got to feel good when they paid their like $3 to rent skates. And they also got that super shareable experience. And then the team at Guildford Town Center did some really fun swag that we partnered with. So they did like mirror ball lip gloss and custom buttons that really played on the nostalgic vibes. It really felt like this cool, cohesive moment that was an easy story to tell and share because it had so much meaning for everyone. Okay, all right. Ingredient number 4, super practical. And this kind of comes back to some of the things Michael was talking about. Smart fabrication, the right fabrication for the right activation. Not every activation is going to have a build out, but this is where the high impact, memorable moments can really happen. So I'll let Michael talk a little bit more about that.
For sure. So, obviously a lot of it comes down to balancing priorities, durability, budget, sustainability. How durable does it have to be? Does it have to be? Who's interacting with it? How much interaction is there going to be with it? A good example is we redid the roller coaster cars at the P&A. So that is a really good example of intense durability, budget, and also sustainability. So a nice combination of all three. Customization versus versatility is also really important to consider. Something that's very, very, very branded and custom to specifically to you and specifically to that event can be tough to reuse. So how do we find ways to also have versatile, reusable pieces as well as the custom branding? Obviously, you want to use your custom colors, your custom brand colors, and your signage, but how do we make it so we can reuse it so you get more bang for your buck? Also considering indoor and outdoor use. Very important. Very, very, very different kettle of fish if it's inside or outside. Also very different price point because of the materials that are outside have to survive outside use. So very important to consider that. What environment is it going to be in? Audience and use, and who's using it? Is it children predominantly? Is it adults? Everybody, the public tends to abuse things, so it's always important to consider how durable it has to be, also how long it's being used in terms of that. Reusable, I sort of mentioned already, packable, storable. How do we find ways to reuse it? Again, you don't want to throw a whole big project away. You want to find ways to reuse it, store it, so that you can have it for multiple years. You invest a lot in a project. How do we reuse it again and again so you can continue having that impact? And then really important to consider, I sort of mentioned it as well, is expecting damage. When the public interacts with things, there's always going to be a bit of damage. So considering how do we deal with that right off the bat, and then have ways or scheduled times to deal with those while the thing is in use. We'll review it, we'll check in with you. We'll fix things as we need to. It's the public. You can't get around it. They're going to damage things. That's just the way it goes. Yeah. So this is a very good example, which I sort of mentioned a couple minutes ago here, was we redid the roller coaster cars for the P&E. So from the 50s, drawings from the 50s, we engineered these right from scratch. It's a really good durability budget sustainability project. Obviously, this required quite a bit of budget because we had to create things from scratch. But we created a really beautiful, extremely durable, safe, engineered product, and also used all local wood. So it's a really proud moment for us. And this is a really good way to highlight what you can really get if you can sort of stretch your budget and also consider all elements at the same time. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. We got a couple more ingredients. Here's another one that might seem obvious, but is easy to miss. Flexibility and collaboration. So as an agency, we've seen this for years. In our earlier days, kind of the first year when we started Monday, larger agencies would often bring us in as subcontractors, and they would act as an intermediary between us and the client. And I have to say, the work was always 10 times stronger when those agency partners pulled us in to hear directly from the client themselves. So you might be in situations where you have different partners running different aspects of your activation. And, one might be designing or producing a space, another might be staffing the event, another might be doing PR or running influencers, or maybe they're all working with your in-house team. And the earlier you put everyone on a call together to ensure they all understand what the other needs, the more efficient the work is going to be. Like I said, I'm in the middle of working on a quote with Michael, and there's 3 agencies involved and a fabricator. And the beautiful thing about it is we're all meeting even before the project has started. We're creating alignment even in how we're approaching the project. And we're seeing it brings more solutions to the table. We're finding cost savings, and we're able to maybe like poke some holes in the client's original concept to ensure that it's not going to kind of flounder later on. Here's a great example of an activation where there were a lot of players. There were 2 different fabricators and there were 3 different stakeholders using this space. So we called this activation All Wrapped Up. It's a gift wrap lounge. Also, in addition to being a gift wrap lounge, it was a lounge for the Christmas elves at this particular shopping center. So there was a staging area for the elves and for Santa that needed to be like, you don't want to see the elves and Santa walking up to Santa's grotto. You want to make sure that it feels really private. Elves don't have downtime. It was also a space for the Surrey firefighters who were doing fundraising in the space, doing the gift wrapping. And there was a cafe element. So all of those different stakeholders were using the space. We were repurposing some structural components from a previous activation, and storage was really limited. So everything needed to be super versatile, packable, and everyone needed to understand the others' requirements. Okay, the last ingredient is you got to talk about it. You got to make sure that you don't invest everything up front and not actually get people out to your event. So we like to think of promotion on 3 different levels. First, your own channels. This is the obvious one. The media you buy, your social channels, on your website if you're promoting it there. Any banners or other, if you have a physical retail space, can you promote it kind of in a POS level? Second, your partners. How do you set your partners up to maximize the impact of your joint efforts? So you want to make sure that they have those assets, that they're set up to cross-post on their channels, to find out what types of content they're most likely to share so that you can give them what they need. And hopefully they're going to give you what they need as well. And then finally, all of the content creators that you're going to be inviting to your activation. Can you give them a simple brief with that messaging and story that you've already created, the look and feel, a set of assets, some potential story angles or art direction that make their job easier? And here's a great example of that. Again, you might recognize this little surf shack from our holiday activation. This is where the partner that we were working with, which was a cafe called The Palm, they really tapped into their network and it gave this activation a massive boost. So the team that was running the cafe was constantly posting, getting their community excited. They had a whole set of assets, including all the logos that they could custom print onto lattes, which was very photographable. So lots of fun interactive moments that made for good promotion. There was this kind of custom wave aspect, which I'll show you in a minute, a lifeguard chair, and all of this made it kind of really shareable for the community. All right, awesome. Thanks for sticking with us. Those are our 6 ingredients. We're going to spend a couple more minutes just talking about some trends that we're seeing and giving you some inspiration. And then we're going to save the last 10 minutes for conversation, for shares from all of you about what you've seen and what really has worked, or questions that have lingered, what hasn't worked. So here's just some high-level trends that we're seeing in amongst our clients, but also in the broader marketplace. So first of all, like I said, IRL, physical experiential activations are now central to most brands' strategies. We're hearing that digital ad spend is starting to be prohibitive, and community activations are really driving incredible results. And we're hearing that something even as intimate as like a 30-person gathering can have the potential to reach 30,000 people if the right attendees are there, if they're sharing about their experiences. I just think there's huge top of funnel awareness building that happens in these contexts. Number 2, we know that great activations can actually be super simple. We have shown you some pretty like high budget activations here, but we don't always need to invest in high production activations. I'm sure you've all seen this. Sometimes the best community moments can just be really, really simple, giving people a reason to come together. I saw one this morning that if you follow me on LinkedIn, you might have seen I posted about it. It's not simple. It required a lot of planning, but it doesn't require kind of like a physical build. Bandit Running, who I think always knock it out of the park, they're teaming up with another company to do something called the New York Bakery Run. And it's a kind of fun social half marathon. And along the way, you stop at 6 of New York's best bakeries where you would normally have to line up for an hour just to get one pastry, but you kind of get to skip the line. It's super social. There's like so much good about it that, yeah, there's a million reasons why I love it. Find me on LinkedIn to find out why. We know that experiences trump transactional. You know, experience is more important than transaction. And it's tempting for brands maybe to just do giveaways. They're really easy, but we find that those kinds of transactional giveaways don't have the same amount of sticking power that a more experiential moment does. So you want to think about how you can amplify and create moments of connection. You might acquire a new customer doing a giveaway, but it doesn't create those super fans, and it doesn't always come with the amplification that an activation does. We're seeing that activations are stronger when there's a give back component and they're purpose driven. I suspect all of you, because you're here, you're probably motivated that way and really good at that. But I think it's worth celebrating those give back moments a little louder. I think a bigger cause or a purpose tends to stick with people. Sometimes we bury the lead on that one and we forget to let people know that they're giving back by participating. Blurring content and community. This is something that we're seeing. The simple addition of a dedicated videographer or someone there to take photos, it's such a small price to pay to get massive reach for your event or activation. And I think every single time you get your community together, treat it as if it's a campaign. This is a moment to get content. Consider how that content can live across all of your channels. A couple more, we've alluded to some of this. We're seeing this desire for things to be modular or mobile. So there's a reason in terms of just like exposure, obviously, but there's also a sustainability and a cost savings piece. When you design activations that can move, you really extend the life. So, what would it look like to have a single thing that can move across the country or spend time in each of your key markets or in each of your retail spaces? It means you can split costs across multiple budgets. It means you can kind of build anticipation using that kind of road trip or journey as it gets closer and closer to the next location. And then the last thing is just thinking about various levels of engagement. We're going to show an example of this in a minute, but some of the Monday team was in Denver recently, and we spent a whole evening at Meow Wolf. If you haven't heard of Meow Wolf, everyone that does experiential, I think, should visit one if you can. It's this multi-story interactive art exhibit, and they work with over 100 artists, I think. And you could just go to Meow Wolf and spend like an hour or two walking through it. That's what we essentially did. We were limited on time, but there's also other layers. There's like a mystery to solve. You can purchase an extra card, like an RFID card. It's called a Boop card that helps you unlock deeper content as you go through it. And you collect these memory fragments, and it kind of pulls you into this story-driven quest. It's like being in a live action video game. And you might have different levels to a pop-up as well. You could have people come in for a styling session or a cocktail party or a floral arrangement workshop. Creating those different levels of friction that are going to engage different people who are at different levels of their fandom, I think is really important. Here's some visuals that have been inspiring us lately. And Ryan pulled these together, so I'm going to let him flag what he thinks are magical about these ones.
Yeah, it's incredible the time that we're at now. If we put ourselves in the shoes of the end user, the customer, I mean, we're the same, right? We're also customers and end users. And it's crazy how we encounter brands now. We encounter brands and products in a digital space. And the gap between that all the way up to the actual product experience when we purchase it or we take a stab at it or a chance is huge. It's massive. And we invest so much in digital that I think that a perfectly timed experience, activation in real life, really creates such a physical context for people that it just sometimes clicks. Like when I see Prada and Skims, for example, a manifestation of that experience online, that the bubbliness or the colors of it, it takes on a different level. I think the things that I want to express here is the idea of immersion. It's like there's a certain level of immersion. So you can invest a lot of money in bringing people into those brands. That's what brands are doing, as you can see at those blue and at those dark kind of photos. There's also kind of like almost a personification of those brands that you're seeing in Prada, in Skims. And then there's the actual like almost like showing you a different side of these brands where, hey, you can have a conversation with us through bulletin boards. Hey, look, Glossier, we're not just about makeup brand. We can get down to earth. We can contextualize a product within these kinds of settings, and it becomes relatable in a different way. There is workshops, there is things, there are opportunities where brands are allowing people to customize their products, break it apart, making it really real that these are real things. And sometimes enough seeing that product blown apart or seeing it in different scale, when people share those stories, it adds that layer of realness and level of narrative and story that goes it back into the ether, and it somehow becomes a little bit more real for everybody else that's viewing it online. So that's just like some of the thoughts that gets us excited, and I think where things are going, and I think that the value of activations.